In Victorian London, desire was not sold on the street. It was sold on paper. Not shouts in the alleys, not random acquaintances, but catalogues, like in a store. Numbers, nicknames, prices, addresses, and one thick leather register with names that were never supposed to be found. Today we will open this book, and you will feel the page rustling under your fingers, sticky with old wax and other people's touches. You will hear the lock clicking softly in the dark corridor behind the door. Because this network was organized as a company. Shocking fact. In one line, you could buy not only a meeting, you could buy silence. Sometimes, disappearance. The danger is simple. If your name falls into the wrong hands, you become not a person, but an order. And if you find out who really runs this system, you have a problem worse than a scandal, a threat to life. There will be a real tragedy in this story. There will be one name in the book that is repeated too often, and there will be a moment when someone will understand. The catalogue is not a list of women. It is a list of traps. And you, could you survive in a city where desire works by contract and a mistake is punished by silence? This is not a horror story. This is history. Chapter 1. The Book That Shouldn't Be. London, late 1880s. The city breathes of damp coal, wet cobblestones, and hot metal. Night doesn't fall here. It creeps in like factory smoke, slowly, heavily, without permission. Gaslights sparkle in the fog, as if someone had placed small yellow eyes on the streets, staring and unblinking. In this part of town, people rarely call themselves by their real names, not because they're criminals, but because London is a machine. And if a machine remembers your name, it can swallow it with you. I wasn't here for romance or adventure. I was a man whose profession made you see what others didn't see, and didn't want to see. My name was Edward Gray. I worked as a clerk and assistant in an office that had a respectable name and a proper facade. Agency for Private Assignments and Recommended Introductions. Such a wording does not arouse suspicion in London. On the contrary, it sounds almost decent. Someone is looking for a nanny. Someone is looking for a nurse for a sick father. Someone is looking for a companion for a widow. And someone is looking for something else. And the word something else was never said out loud in our office. That day, I arrived earlier than usual. It was still dark, and the narrow windows were filled with a bluish, pre-morning chill. The office smelled of paper, old ink, and the dry dust that settles on the shelves when things are done quietly. The safe in the corner seemed ordinary. A heavy door, a brass lock, the keys in the pocket of the owner, Mr. Mercer. Mr. Mercer was a man of proper manners, with neatly combed hair, and never once raised his voice. He could speak in a way that made the other person lower his voice, as if he were afraid of disturbing the air. But it wasn't the safe that made me stop. It was the book that stopped me. It wasn't where it should have been. On the desk, in the faint light that filtered in from the hallway. Thick, leather-bound, slightly worn around the edges, with dark spots, as if it had been held by hands that weren't always clean. The book looked as if someone had put it there in a hurry, or deliberately, with a challenge. I knew this thing. We called it simply the Register. None of the petty clerks were to touch it without permission. Mr. Mercer said it was internal documentation, and he smiled as if he were talking about coal bills. But everyone in the office knew the register is the heart, not the facade, not the correspondence, not the neat receipts to show to the police or any irritated man. The heart of the system was in that leather and paper. I should have turned away, shut the door, sit down at my desk and pretend I hadn't seen it. That's what most people in London do when they happen to notice something dangerous. They glance and look away to get on with their lives. But I was already getting closer, and I could already see the faint embossed lettering on the cover, barely visible in this light. Catalogue. The word struck me coldly. A catalogue. Like a shop. Like a furniture dealer. Like a clothier. Only here, the goods had no right to complain. I touched the binding with my fingertips. The leather was cool and smooth, but slightly sticky from old age, as if the book remembered the warmth of the hands that had held it with the same thoughts. Choose, order, use, forget. I opened it only 2 fingers wide, as if I was afraid the book might bite. The paper rustled so loudly that I thought it might be heard on the street, but the office was silent. Only somewhere far away, in the corridor, a blackboard creaked. Inside were lines, columns, not romantic descriptions. No, everything was dry, businesslike here. Names, pseudonyms, addresses of intermediaries, marks, dates. Sometimes a short note on the side, written in different ink. Careful. Do not repeat. Pays without bargaining. Wants silence. And then I saw something that gave me a sick feeling in my stomach, like an elevator falling. One name kept repeating itself. Not once, not twice. 4 times in 1 month. And next to it was a brief note, as if the person who wrote it had no doubt about their authority. Did not return. I stared at those words for a long time. They were simple. They didn't scream. They didn't tell the details. They didn't draw blood. They were worse. Because in London, didn't come back meant hundreds of options, and almost all of them were bad. I was taught, don't draw conclusions without facts. But here the fact itself was already a sentence. If a person didn't come back in a system that works like a company, then someone either didn't get the goods, or couldn't repay the debt, or had become too dangerous to exist. I didn't turn the page. I was afraid of what I would find next, and I was even more afraid that someone might find me here. I was about to close the book when I noticed a thin mark on the bottom margin of the page, as if someone had dipped a pen and drawn a line, but instead of ink, there was something darker, brown, dried. I brought my fingers closer and smelled the scent, not sharp, not distinct, but enough to make my brain react. Metal and old age. I took a half step back. At that moment, the office door closed quietly. Not with a bang, not a slam, just the lock clicked shut, as if someone had turned the key carefully with experience. I didn't turn around right away, because there are those seconds when the body pretends not to hear, giving the mind a chance to come up with a safe explanation. Mr. Mercer, I told myself. It's just that Mr. Mercer came early. But if it's Mr. Mercer, why doesn't he say hello? Why does he lock the door? I slowly raised my head. In the reflection of the dark glass on the cabinet, I saw a silhouette. The man stood so still, as if he were part of the furniture. He was wearing a dark cloak, a hat, and he didn't move. I couldn't see his face, but I felt that he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the book. And then I understood the first rule of this story. It doesn't matter who you are. What matters is what you know. And if you know too much, you may not be given the opportunity to tell anyone. I took a breath of air. It was dry and cold. The room became quieter than it could be. It was as if even the dust had stopped falling. The man took a step forward, slow, confident. The step of a man who came not to ask, but to take. "You're early," he said finally. His voice was low, even, without emotion, like an accountant announcing the amount of a debt. I couldn't find any right answer in myself. Any word would sound like an excuse, and excuses are only needed when it's already been decided that you're guilty. I looked at the book. On the line, "Did not return." And I thought, what if the next line is my name? The man leaned closer to the table, his eyes still on the register. "You know," he said almost quietly, "that this book should not be open?" It wasn't a question. I felt the cold behind me, although there was no draft in the room. And then it became clear to me. Today, I hadn't just accidentally peeked into someone else's business. I touched a mechanism that works under the city, and the mechanism noticed me. The man reached out for the book, and in that second I had a choice. One of those choices that divide life into before and after. Give the register back and hope that I would simply be forgotten, or grab it first and try to escape with evidence that could kill me faster than any knife. I realized, if I make the wrong move, the next sound in this room will not be a page. It will be silence. The man without a face. There are times when decisions are not made by reason. They are made by fear. I don't remember exactly how my hand rushed forward. I only remember the feeling, as if the air in the room suddenly became thick as syrup. My fingers slid over the skin of the register. The book was heavier than I expected, as if there was not paper inside, but stone. The man in the cloak didn't flinch. That was the worst part. He didn't rush at me. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He just looked, calmly, coldly. That's the look of people who know. They don't need to rush. I pressed the book to my chest and took a step back. The chair fell with a dull, wooden groan. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. My heart was beating so loudly that I was sure it could be heard even on the stairs. "Put it down," the man said. Still level, still quiet. I turned to the door into the inner hallway. It didn't lead to the street, only to a dark, narrow passage between the cabinets and the archives. But instinct screamed, "Move." I jerked. A step. Another. My fingers touched the brass handle, and at that moment I heard a sound behind me, almost inaudible, soft, deathly calm. A step. He wasn't even in a hurry. The hallway was dark and cold. It smelled of dust and damp and old wallpaper paste. I ran almost at random, holding the register as if it were the only thing holding me back in reality. There was no shouting behind me. There was no pursuit. Just slow, even steps. And that was scarier than any running. Because when someone doesn't hurry after a person who is running away, it means only one thing. He is sure that escape is impossible. The stairs down led to a semi-basement, where boxes of documents and old furniture were stored. I almost slipped on the last step. My hands became wet. The book slipped out. The morning fog was seeping even here, a thin gray veil through a narrow window under the ceiling. I hid between the tall cabinets. And then, for the first time, I allowed myself to listen. The footsteps were approaching, slow, even, without any emotion. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped somewhere above. Silence. Another second. More. And suddenly, nothing. No movement. No sound. Fear has a strange thing about it. When the threat is gone, it doesn't diminish. It changes. Now I wasn't afraid of footsteps. I was afraid that he knew where I was, that he was standing somewhere in the dark, watching, waiting. "Mr. Gray." The voice came from very close by. I flinched so hard that my shoulder hit the cupboard. He was standing at the end of the aisle. The mist from the window cast a ghostly halo around him. His face was still in shadow, only a pale outline under his hat. "You took what wasn't yours." I didn't answer, because at that moment I realized something else. He knew my name. "You work in a place where trust is currency," he continued. "Sometimes more precious than gold." He took a step. I backed away instinctively. "You have opened a book that is not to be opened without permission." Another step. "And now you are in a position that cannot be remedied by an apology." I swallowed. "Who are you?" I blurted out. The man tilted his head slightly. "Nobody you want to know." It was the truth. I could feel in my bones. He was not the police. He was not an ordinary customer. There was that special silence about him that belongs to people who do not explain their intentions. "Give me the register," he said. His hand was gloved. It did not tremble. I gripped the book tighter. "What if I say no?" I whispered. A pause. Long. Almost unbearable. "Then, Mr. Gray," the voice remained soft, "you will join those who did not return." My heart pounded against my ribs. I thought of the line in the book, the name that kept repeating, the mark. Did not return. And just then, another sound came from the basement. New, unexpected, the creaking of a door. We both turned. A woman stood on the steps, young, in a dark cloak, her face pale in the morning light. She looked as if she had not expected to see me here, or him. Her eyes widened, for a moment, just a moment, but that was enough. "You are late," the man in the cloak said. And for the first time, something new came into his voice. Irritation. The woman didn't answer. She was looking at the register in my hands, and I saw in her eyes not fear, but recognition. "You shouldn't have left it open," she said coldly. And now I understood the worst. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to him. In that second, I realized I hadn't accidentally fallen into a trap. I was standing between two people who knew this system much better than I did, and they both needed the register. The woman took a step down. The man, he didn't move. The air between them became as tense as a string. "The book must return," she said. "The book is already returning," he replied. And slowly he reached out his hand. To me. I realized. Another second and there will be no choice. A name that didn't exist. In the cramped basement of London, even the fog seemed wary. The woman stood on the steps, motionless, like a shadow learning to breathe. The light from the narrow window touched her face in a cold streak, emphasizing the paleness of her skin and the clear line of her lips. She didn't look scared. She looked irritated, as if someone had upset the order of a well-tuned mechanism. "You're causing problems," she said to the man in the cloak. Her voice was even, no panic, no hurry. The voice of someone used to being listened to. "Problems only arise when someone reveals something they shouldn't reveal," he replied. And that tone again, cold, impersonal. I stood between them, gripping the register until my fingers were numb. In that moment, I ceased to be a person. I became an object, a thing to be discussed without asking permission. The woman looked at me. Her eyes were dark, very attentive, and dangerously calm. "You must be new," she said. I didn't answer. "He's not new," the man interrupted. "He's careless." The silence between them was dense. I felt there was a story here, an ancient one, a tense one, and I had just found myself in the middle of it. "Give me the book," the woman said to me. It didn't sound like a request, like an instruction. "Don't give me the book," the man said almost immediately. And for the first time, I heard something alive in his voice. Interest. I looked at them both, and suddenly I realized something strange. None of them were sure they were in complete control. Otherwise, they wouldn't talk. They would act. "What is this book?" I asked quietly. The woman smiled faintly. A belated question. The man in the cloak took another slow step. "It's a list of decisions, Mr. Gray." "Decisions?" I whispered. "Who will be elected? Who will be recommended? Who will be forgotten?" A chill ran through me. I remembered the line, "Did not turn back." The woman went down another step. "You don't understand what you've interfered with." "Then explain," I replied, surprised at my own audacity. She looked at me for a longer moment. She assessed. "It's a catalogue," she said finally, "but not the kind you think." She slowly moved closer. "In London, desire is not chaotic. It's organized, managed, controlled." "Like a company," the man added quietly. "There are no chance encounters here," she continued. "There are intermediaries, guarantees, recommendations, protection." She paused. "And punishment." "Punishment for what?" I asked. The woman tilted her head. "For breaking the rules." I looked down at the register, and then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On one of the lines, a name, written in a different handwriting, pressed harder into the paper. L. Whitmore. And next to it, a mark, several times, too many times. "That name," I whispered. The woman looked sharply at the page, and for the first time her composure cracked, subtly but real. The man in the cloak slowly turned his head. "You see something you shouldn't have seen." "Who is she?" I asked. The woman was silent. The man answered. "A person who never existed." The air in the basement grew colder. "Is that a pseudonym?" I asked. "It's a mistake," the woman said. "Too fast." The man smiled softly. "It's not a mistake." He looked at her. "It's proof." Something had changed between them. Now it wasn't just tension. It was hostility. "You shouldn't have put her in again," the woman said coldly. "She put herself in," he replied. A chill ran through me. "What are you talking about?" The woman looked at me, and this time there was something like a warning in her eyes. If a person disappears from the directory, their name disappears forever. She leaned closer. But if it comes back, pause. So someone wants to be seen. I looked at the line. L. Whitmore. Is she alive? I whispered. Silence. Long. Dead. No one survives a disappearance like that, the man said quietly. And at that very moment, a new sound came from above. Loud. Sharp. The office door. Someone entered. The woman shuddered. They're here already. Give me the book, the man said sharply. Footsteps. Several. Fast. Not his. Not her. I understood with icy clarity. Now the danger is greater than personal. Now others are involved in this story. And if the register is found on me, I will not be a witness. I will be a problem to be solved. Too late, the woman whispered. The footsteps were already on the stairs, and in that second I realized. A name that didn't exist just became the reason that we all might not return. Those who come without a knock. Before I saw them, I heard them. The footsteps on the stairs were quick, confident, unfamiliar. Not cautious, not reserved. The footsteps of people who were not afraid to be heard. The air in the basement became sharp, like before a thunderstorm. The woman took a half step back. Too soon, she whispered. Now, for the first time, fear appeared in her voice. Real. The man in the cloak did not move, but I felt his presence change. He ceased to be an observer. He became a predator about to leap. The door upstairs suddenly opened. It did not creak. It slammed menacingly against the wall. Downstairs, came a rough voice. The woman turned sharply to me. If they find the book on you, you're dead. It was said without drama, as a matter of fact. Who is it? I whispered. People who don't exist in the reports, the man in the cloak answered coldly. Footsteps were already descending. I was clutching the register so tightly that the edges of the binding cut into my chest. Run away? There's nowhere to go. Hide? Too late. The woman looked around. Her gaze stopped on an old wooden cabinet without doors. Over there. I didn't argue. I dove into the dark space between the boxes and shelves. Dust hit my nose. It became difficult to breathe. Footsteps on the stairs. Closer. More. All I could see was a narrow gap between the boards. And silhouettes. 3. They didn't look like police. Too rough movements. Too heavy breathing. Too much silence. Where is he? One snarled. You're late, the man in the cloak said flatly. I couldn't see his face, but I could hear the smile in his voice. We were told the book was open. A pause. You've been misinformed. One of the new arrivals took a sharp step forward. I heard metal. Weapons. Don't play with us. The woman stood still. There's no book here. We'll check. My heart was beating so loudly I was afraid they would hear it. Heavy footsteps in the basement. Cupboards. Boxes. Closer. The register in my hands now seemed not to be evidence, but a verdict. And then, the unthinkable happened. The man in the cloak suddenly made a sharp movement. Fast, precise, without warning. A dull thud, someone's scream, a shot, a deafening explosion of sound in the closed basement. Dust fell from the ceiling. The woman screamed. I froze. Screams, struggle, another blow, and then silence. So sudden that it seemed unnatural. I was afraid to even blink. Footsteps, slow, alone, towards the closet. The board in front of me moved slightly. Light, fog, silhouette. The man in the cloak was looking straight at me. "Come out, Mr. Gray." The voice was even again, as if nothing had happened. I slowly stepped out and saw. One of the men lay motionless. The other groaned, pressing his shoulder. The third disappeared. "You," I whispered. "Now you understand," he said quietly, "why this book is deadly dangerous." The woman looked at the scene with a pale face. "They will return." "Without a doubt," he replied, and he looked at me. "And next time they will not come looking for the book." A pause. "They will come looking for you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Whitmore," the woman whispered. The man tilted his head slightly. "Exactly." "What kind of name is that?" I almost blurted out. The woman looked me straight in the eye and said the words that changed everything. "This is not the woman from the catalogue." Pause. "This is the woman who broke the system." The silence turned icy. "And if she is alive," the man in the cloak finished for her, "this book will cause a new war." I looked at the register, at the name, at the people who had just shot at each other through the paper, and I realized, I am no longer an outsider. I am already inside. The woman who shouldn't have been. After the shot, the silence in the basement was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a consequence. The dust settled slowly in the cold light from the window. Somewhere above, a door slammed shut. A wounded man groaned softly, but no one paid him any attention. In this city, pain was rarely the center of events. The center was always information or threat. I was still holding the register. It felt hot now, as if the book knew that a gun had just rung through it. "We need to go," the woman said. Her voice was collected again, but the tension remained in her eyes. "They won't leave this unanswered." "They never do," the man in the cloak replied. I looked at them both. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" The woman slowly turned her gaze to me. A long pause. Appreciation. "You're already part of this, Mr. Gray." "I didn't ask for it." "Nobody asks," she said quietly. We went up the narrow stairs. The office looked almost ordinary. An overturned chair, an open drawer. On the desk was a smear of ink that had spread like a dark map of an unknown country. Outside, London was living its morning. The wheels of carriages, the shouts of merchants, the rustle of a city that never stops for other people's disasters. We stepped out into the fog. The cold air hit my lungs. "Who is she?" I asked. The woman walked quickly, not looking back. "You saw the name." "Whitmore." She nodded. "A name that shouldn't appear in the register. Why?" She stopped, slowly turned, and now there was no businesslike coldness in her gaze. There was something different, almost personal, because she wasn't part of the catalogue. A pause. She was part of the system. I didn't understand right away. She worked for an agency? She was building an agency. A chill ran down my spine. Whitmore was one of those who turned desire into a business, the woman said more quietly. Middlemen, pseudonyms, client protection, women's protection. "Protection?" I asked. A bitter smile. "In Victorian London, that word always means something else." We moved on down the narrow street. The stones underfoot were wet. The sewers smelled strongly of damp and rot. The gas lights were still burning, though the day was beginning to seep through the fog. She knew all the rules, the woman continued, all the contracts, all the secrets. A pause. And one day, she disappeared. I felt a familiar tightening in my stomach. She didn't come back. Exactly. And now her name has come back into the book. Like a ghost, the man in the cloak said quietly. I turned sharply to him. You knew her? He didn't answer immediately. In this case, Mr. Gray, there are no people who didn't know Whitmore. We turned into a narrower alley. It was quieter here, darker. London seemed to lower its voice in places like this. If she's dead, I said, who writes her name? The woman looked at me intently. That's the right question. The wind blew slowly down the street, stirring the edge of her cloak. There are only two possibilities, she continued. One, someone is playing a dangerous game. Second, she paused, she's alive. My heart skipped a beat. That's impossible. The woman leaned closer. Impossible in London. It's just a matter of time. And it was at that moment that I noticed something strange. On the other side of the street, a silhouette. A man stood still, too still. They're leading us, the man in the cloak said quietly. The woman didn't look back. I knew. Who are they now? I whispered. The answer was almost silent. Those who want Whitmore dead. I squeezed the register, and for the first time I felt more than just fear, but a strange, dangerous feeling. Compassion for a woman I had never seen. A woman the system had erased, but whose name refused to disappear. If she's alive, I whispered. The woman looked at me, and something new flashed in her eyes, soft, almost warm. Then, Mr. Gray, we are all in much greater danger than you think. The house where walls whisper. The silhouette across the street didn't move. Sometimes stillness screams louder than any gesture. Don't look back, the man in the cloak said quietly. I couldn't anyway. My body froze in a strange mixture of fear and instinct. Is that them? I asked, barely audible. It's always they, the woman replied. Her voice became coldly controlled again, but her pace quickened. We turned into a maze of narrow alleys where London was becoming different, darker, closer. It was as if the city was shrugging its shoulders. The air here smelled of wet stone, kerosene, and something else, the old age settling in the cracks of the brick. Where are we going? I whispered. Where they won't be looking for you yet, the woman said. A pause. And where you might get answers. The house stood in semi-darkness, almost drowned in fog. Old, tall, with windows that looked like empty eye sockets. No sign of life. Here? I couldn't help myself. Exactly here, she answered quietly. The door opened without a knock. That was the first thing I didn't like. The second was the smell. Inside it smelled of wax, old wood, and the faint, almost imperceptible scent of perfume. Not cheap, aged. The light was dim. Candles, lots of candles. Their flames trembled as if the air had its own restlessness. And then I heard a voice. Feminine, soft, dangerously calm. You brought him. My heart sank. She stood by the fireplace, a slender figure in a dark dress. Light glinted over a pale face, eyes attentive, penetrating. "Madam," I began. "Don't call me that," she said quietly. The woman beside me tensed. "Whitmore." Silence. The candles flickered. Did I dream it? The woman by the fireplace smiled faintly. "That name no longer belongs to me." A chill ran through me. "But it's back in the register," the man in the cloak said. Her gaze sharpened. "I know." I stared at her, unable to look away. She wasn't a ghost, not a legend, not a dead line in a book. She was alive. "It's impossible," I whispered. She looked at me, and I felt a strange, almost physical sensation, as if I had been read. "London often confuses impossible with uncomfortable," she said calmly. The woman next to me took a step forward. "They're hunting you. They always have. Your name is back in the book." Whitmore slowly moved closer. The candlelight slid across her face. There was weariness in it, and something else, the shadow of an old pain. "I didn't write it." The air turned icy. "Then who?" the man in the cloak asked quietly. She looked into the fire. A long pause. "Someone who wants the system to fall." My heart skipped a beat. "The system?" I whispered. She turned slowly to me. "You think this is a story about desire?" A faint smile. "No, Mr. Gray." A pause. "It's a story about control." The silence became almost palpable. "A register is not a catalogue of women," she said more quietly. "It's a map of power. Debts, secrets, addictions, people who can be broken." I gripped the book tighter. "And if this map falls into the wrong hands, the city will burn without fire," the man in the cloak finished. Whitmore looked at him for a long time, as if there was a long, complicated history between them. "You knew I was alive." "I was hoping." A barely perceptible glance, tense, almost personal. And then I felt it. Something new, dangerous. Not just fear, not just tension, but a strange feeling. Excitement. Whitmore looked at me and said almost quietly, "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." And at that very moment, there was a knock on the door, sharp, loud, impatient. The candles flickered. "They found us," the woman whispered. Whitmore slowly raised her eyes, and for the first time I saw something truly disturbing about them. "No." Pause. "This is worse." The knock came again, louder. "It's not they," she said quietly. My heart sank. "Then who?" Whitmore whispered, "The one who runs the catalogue." The one who runs the catalogue. The knock on the door came again, not as a request, as a reminder. The room was so quiet I could hear the candle wax crackling. Whitmore didn't move, but her face had changed. Not fear, worse, recognition. "Don't open it," the woman next to me said quietly. The man in the cloak was already looking at the door, still, tense. "He'll come in anyway," Whitmore said almost silently. My heart pounded against my ribs. "Who is it?" I whispered. Whitmore slowly turned her gaze to me and said something that sent a chill down my spine. "A man who never appears in the records." A pause. "But present in every decision." Knock. Third. Slow. Sure. The door opened. No one had touched it. He entered so quietly as if the darkness had let him in on its own. A tall man, dark coat, gloves, hat. I couldn't make out his face. The candlelight seemed to avoid him. "Lillian," he said calmly. Whitmore froze. Lillian. I felt something change in the room. The name didn't sound like a title, like a possession. "Don't call me that," she said coldly. He tilted his head slightly. "But that's your real name." The silence grew heavy. The woman next to me tensed. The man in the cloak made a slight movement forward. "You shouldn't have turned back," Whitmore said. "Neither did you," he replied. His voice was low, soft, and all the more terrifying. "You disappeared beautifully," he continued, almost convincingly. Whitmore stared at him, motionless. "You erased me." "I protected the system." "You broke the people." "I saved order." I stood there, unable to move, because now I understood. This wasn't just a leader. This wasn't just a shadowy figure. This was the center. "You put my name on the register," Whitmore said. "No." A pause. "I let him come back." My heart skipped a beat. "Why?" the cloaked man asked coldly. The stranger slowly turned his head. To see who would start moving. His gaze slid to mine, and in that moment I felt, he knows. "I wonder," he said quietly. "A new face, and a book in my hands." My throat went dry. "You have no idea, Mr. Gray," pause, "how much your curiosity has cost you." Whitmore took a sharp step forward. "He's not a part of this." A faint smile. "Now he is." The candles flickered. The air grew cold. "You're playing a dangerous game," the cloaked man said. "I created this game." Whitmore looked at him with a tension that almost cut the air. "You killed for control. I eliminated chaos. You traded in people. I sold the illusion of safety." The silence became unbearable. "And now?" Whitmore asked quietly. A pause. "Now the system will change." His voice became even quieter. "And you will help me do it." A coldness struck his chest. "Never." He took a step closer, and for the first time, light touched his face. Pale, calm, dangerously emotionless. "You have no choice, Lillian." And then the unthinkable happened. He drew his gun abruptly. A sound of metal shattered the silence. "Because if the book disappears," pause, "London will lose its balance." His gaze is on me again. "And you will be the first victim of the new disorder." My heart froze. Whitmore whispered, "No." Finger on the hook. And in that second I realized, this is no longer a threat. This is a sentence in the process of being carried out. The sound of no return. There is silence before a shot, and there is silence after. They are never the same. All I saw was his hand, even, still, absolutely sure. The gun was pointed straight at me. Whitmore whispered, "No." Click. The sound was dry, almost ordinary, but at that moment the world seemed to shrink. A shot. The candle flames quivered. The roar hit the walls. But pain. There was no pain. I stood, alive, and only a split second later did I understand why. The man in the cloak. He was between us, so fast that my mind refused to believe it. A dull thud. His body swayed. Whitmore screamed. I saw the dark stain slowly spread across the fabric of his coat. No. Her voice was quiet, broken, unreal. The man in the cloak slowly lowered his head, as if surprised himself. The stranger did not move. The gun in his hand remained steady. Predictable, he said calmly. Whitmore rushed forward. She caught him. For the first time, I saw something in her face that could not be faked. Real horror. Look at me. Her hands were shaking. The man in the cloak was barely breathing. That was... His voice broke off. Whitmore pressed him harder. Don't speak. The stranger watched, without emotion. You've always been sentimental, Lillian. Whitmore raised her head sharply, and something else burned in her eyes now. Hatred. You'll kill everyone for the sake of order? Order demands sacrifices. That's not order. That's control. Silence. The man in the cloak exhaled quietly, too quietly. Whitmore froze. No, I saw it. A moment, a tiny one, but fatal. Candlelight, a pale face, stillness. He was no longer breathing. The room went cold. Whitmore didn't scream, didn't cry. She just watched, as if reality refused to become true. You killed him. He chose him. You killed the only person who could... She didn't finish. The stranger took a step closer. You still don't understand, Lillian. Pause. This book doesn't destroy the system. He looked at the registry in my hands. It's restarting it. A chill hit my chest. What does this mean? I whispered. He looked at me. It means, Mr. Gray... Pause. You are now the bearer of balance. My heart sank. Whitmore slowly rose. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dark, dangerously quiet. You have just started a war. A faint smile. No. Pause. I have just returned chaos to the city. The candles flickered. The fire in the fireplace flared up sharply. And then I understood the true horror. This was not the climax. This was the beginning. The city that began the hunt. When death is nearby, time behaves strangely. It either speeds up or stops. I don't know how many seconds we were silent. Whitmore stood still. Her face is pale, like candle wax. Her eyes are dark, but no longer panicked. Only a cold, dangerous clarity. The stranger hid the gun, slowly, routinely, as if he had not just ended a life. Now everything is returning to its place, he said quietly. You killed a man, Whitmore replied coldly. I removed the deviation. He shifted his gaze to me, and I felt it physically, like a blade on skin. And now, pause, a book. I squeezed the register. Whitmore looked at me sharply, and for the first time I saw in her eyes not control, but fear for me. Don't give it away. You're in no position to give advice, he replied. His step was slow, sure. And just then, Whitmore did something I hadn't expected. She grabbed my hand. Run. I froze. What? Now! The world exploded with movement. I rushed to the door. A shout behind me. Rapid footsteps. A dull thud. I didn't look back. Fear pushed harder than curiosity. The street greeted me with a cold fog. London was already awake. Carriages, voices, wheels on stone. But now the city seemed different, because I knew. He would let me go not because of chaos, but because of calculation. I ran. An alley, a turn, more. My heart was beating so loudly that the world seemed muffled. And then I understood. Footsteps. Behind. Someone was chasing me. I turned sharply, almost slipped. The fog swallowed the contours. A silhouette. The wrong man. Another. Then another. Then more. An icy horror swept through me. They were everywhere. Strangers at intersections. Shadows by streetlights. Gazes lingering on a book. And then I realized the terrible truth. He wasn't just looking for me. He had declared me a target. I stopped, gasping for air. London was bustling. It was alive. I didn't suspect, but now the city had become a hunting mechanism. Every face a potential threat. Every step a trap. I ran again, and suddenly, a hand grabbed my shoulder sharply. I spun around. Whitmore. She was breathing fast, eyes strained. "You have no idea what he's done." "He's chasing me." "No." A pause. "He's given a signal." A chill ran down my spine. "What signal?" She looked straight into my eyes. "In this network, Mr. Gray." Pause. "The book is more important than people." My heart stopped. "And now everyone connected to the system," she finished quietly, "is hunting you." The fog became suffocating. I was standing in the middle of the city, alive, noisy, and suddenly I felt absolutely alone. What should I do? Whitmore answered almost in a whisper, "Survive." And at that very second, from the other end of the street, a familiar silhouette appeared. The same one, the one who runs the catalogue. And he smiled. A contract for silence. His smile was almost invisible, but I felt it as clearly as the cold wind in my lungs. He stood in the fog, calm, unhurried, as if the whole city was already doing his bidding. "Don't look at him," Whitmore said quietly. "He sees me. He wants you to know it." My heart was beating painfully loudly. "Let's go," she said sharply. We moved quickly, almost gliding through the fog. London was bustling around us, but now there was something new in that bustle. Tension. I began to notice the looks. Too attentive. Too long. "They know," I whispered. "They feel," Whitmore replied. Difference? Target. We turned sharply into the crowd. Tight, loud, the smells of bodies, smoke, wet clothes. "It's dangerous." That's why he doesn't expect it. And that's when I heard it. There he is. A voice behind him. A stranger. I turned sharply. A man in a dark coat. He didn't look me in the eye. He was looking at a book. "Give it to me." Whitmore pulled me sharply. A scream. Another voice. "Hold him!" The world exploded into chaos. I broke free. I ran. The carriage almost hit me. Someone cursed. Wheels whizzed by. Whitmore kept up. They're closer than I thought. Who are these people? Contracts. What? There's a rule in the system. Her voice broke from running. If the book becomes unstable, pause. The contract is being announced. A chill hit my chest. What contract? She looked at me. A contract for silence. I felt the ground sink. Does that mean you're supposed to be made to be silent? Forever? She didn't answer. We turned sharply into a dark passage between the houses. It was almost dark here, only the faint light of a lantern. Stop! A silhouette in front of us. I froze. A man in a hat, a face in shadow. Whitmore stopped abruptly. Too late, he said quietly. A voice. Familiar. I felt a chill of terror. He stepped into the light. The one who runs the catalogue. The city works fast, he said calmly. Whitmore tensed. You won't get the book. I already got it. I froze. What? His gaze slid to my hands. Empty. My heart froze. The book. It wasn't there. I didn't remember the moment I let it go. Panic hit me hard. No. He smiled faintly. You didn't even notice. Whitmore looked at me sharply. There was shock in her eyes. It's a trap. It's the order, he said quietly. He moved closer. Now, Mr. Gray. Pause. You're no longer needed. The cold became unbearable, and at that moment, from the darkness behind, footsteps, shadows, a lot of them. Whitmore whispered, Run. But I understand. There's no escape now. The contract has been activated. The book has been returned. And now, I've become an extra line in the system, the price the city pays. When you realize that escape is impossible, the fear becomes strangely clear. He no longer panics. He counts the seconds. The shadows emerged from the fog silently. No screams, no threats. These were people who do not pursue. They do. Whitmore stood beside me, still. I could feel the tension in her hand. Don't move suddenly, she whispered. They will kill me. If he says so. He was already standing very close, calm, impeccably composed, the book in his hands. It's a strange thing, Mr. Gray, he said quietly. People always think danger is a knife, a pause, or a bullet. His gaze turned cold. The danger is actually knowledge. I couldn't look away. You're no longer the problem. You're no longer a witness. Silence. You're now, pause, example. A chill ran down her spine. Whitmore stepped forward sharply. No. He slowly turned his head. Do you still think you can change anything? I already have. The silence became sharp. I saw it in her eyes. A decision. Inevitable. Whitmore, I whispered. She didn't even look at me. A book doesn't hold a system, she said quietly. It holds fear. He smiled faintly. Fear, and there is order. No. Pause. Fear is a fragile illusion. And then the unthinkable happened. Whitmore abruptly pulled something out of her pocket. Metal. A gun. I didn't even have time to breathe. A shot. A roar tore through the fog. But she wasn't shooting at him. She was shooting at a book. The skin tore. The paper caught fire. The world seemed to stop. Fire. Thin. Greedy. His face lost its composure for the first time. You. A second shot. The flames suddenly engulfed the pages. No! He rushed forward. Too late. The book was burning. London seemed to hold its breath at that moment. You just killed the system, I whispered. Whitmore answered quietly. No. A pause. I released the people. The shadows around him froze. It was as if the world had lost its instructions. He stared at the fire with a horror that could not be played. You don't understand what you have done. Whitmore looked at him calmly. I understand better than you do. The fire was consuming names, addresses, contracts, the past. And then I realized the true scale. This was not just a book. This was a map of power over the city. And it was disappearing. He slowly looked up, and in his eyes there was no cold certainty now. There was fury. You have doomed London to chaos. Whitmore whispered. London was already chaos. Pause. Simply beautifully organized. The flames were dying out, along with the system. I stood in the fog, alive. But I knew, this is not the end, because a person who has lost power becomes the most dangerous. Silence that cannot be bought. The fire died out, not abruptly, not dramatically, but slowly, as if the city itself could not believe in its own liberation. The charred pages crumbled into ashes. Names, addresses, contracts, that which governed people's destinies more silently than the law. The fog swallowed the smell of burning. London was noisy again. Carriages, voices, wheels on stone, as if nothing had happened. But we knew. He stood still, staring at the ashes. And in this stillness, there was now no control. There was something more terrible. The emptiness of a man who had lost his power. You have no idea what will happen now, he said quietly. Whitmore looked calmly, almost tenderly. For the first time in a long time. Pause. I imagine. He looked up. The rage in his eyes was no longer cold. It had become alive. Dangerous. Do you think the system lived in a book? No, she answered quietly. It lived in fear. Silence. And fear, she took a step closer. It has the property of dying. I could feel my heart beating differently. Not from panic, from awareness. You haven't changed anything, he hissed. A city always needs order. Whitmore smiled faintly. Order built on disappearances is not order. Pause. This is business. He moved abruptly. I didn't even have time to understand. The gun. His hand trembled. For the first time. If the system can't exist. Pause. You shouldn't exist either. The world shrank again. All I saw was his hand, the gun, Whitmore. But she didn't back down. That's the difference between us, she said quietly. You still think this can be solved with a shot. Click. The shot tore through the fog. I shuddered. Silence. Long. Unreal. I slowly opened my eyes. He was standing. alive. And Whitmore? No. She swayed, slowly, almost beautifully. I managed to grab her. The world went silent. No, no, no. Her hands were cold. He looked at us silently, his face calm again, almost empty. Balance, he said quietly, and went into the fog, disappeared, as always. I held Whitmore. I felt life slowly slipping away. She barely opened her eyes. London, barely audible, always survives. Don't speak. A faint smile. Now it's your turn. Her fingers squeezed my hand, weakly. Remember. Pause. A faint breath. Silence. Pause. Which is impossible to buy. And then she froze. The fog swallowed the city. London was noisy. She lived, as if nothing had happened. But the truth remained, not in a book, in memory, in this story. Could you survive in a city where your name is a commodity? This is not a horror story. This is history.